Alrighty, here's the deal. As of late, I've been thinking about whether or not I'd compete in Generation 10's VGC circuit, but I know it's a bit late for me to consider competing in the current Gen 9 format as Worlds is in a couple months, and there wouldn't really be that much time to collect enough points for the Worlds invite. I could be wrong on that, but regardless, I would need to invest a lot of time to catch up on the formats and see what Pokemon are performing well. Yeah, I know we have all of the highlights from recent official tournaments that are posted on their YouTube channel, so I can see what has been working out and what hasn't, but that still just isn't enough for me. But I overall just won't have the time I would want to dedicate to this sort of thing just yet. To get myself into the VGC mood, I took a look at my Discord server to figure out and decide what type of tournament would be played for the month over on Pokemon Battle Revolution. And that's what the thought clicked into my head. I thought to myself, you know what? Let's check out the VGC 2010 format and give it a spin. Let's take a stroll through memory lane here, as this particular format is not just a much older one compared to today's Scarlet and Violet, but how the rules were also pretty drastically different at the time as well. VGC in 2010 were played on Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and lucky for us, PBR supports connectivity for those games, so any new updated learn sets for some of the Pokemon like Dragonite learning Extreme Speed were able to be used. Some of the same rules that were used back then that are still used now are the traditional bring 6 on your team and select 4 of them to use in battle. Level 50, so anything that was over this level would auto level down, and Pokemon that were level 1 would remain at level 1. Item clause being in effect, meaning you can't have 2 Focus Sash users, for example, on the same team, with the included ruling of Soul Dew being banned, but the items on your Pokemon can be moved around during each battle. Mythical Pokemon were banned, but these group of legendaries were allowed, and you were allowed to put 4 of them on your team, but you can only bring 2 of them in the battle. Yeah, you heard me right. Restricted legendaries, as they are called nowadays, are sometimes brought into VGC formats to spice things up a bit. This was no exception. Now do you understand why Soul Dew was banned? Sorry Latios, not today. No Soul Dew boosted Draco Meteors out of you. Tyranitar was allowed in this format. In 2009, they had a weird rule where Pokemon level 50 and under were allowed, and this included when Pokemon evolved, the moves that they learned, and all these different weird things. Like, speaking of Tyranitar, since it evolves at level 55, but because of the rules, you can't even use it. And the same goes for Dragonite. It was one heck of a weird format at the time, so if you guys are interested in me covering that, then maybe I could perhaps talk about it in a future video. So if that's the case, that's where you would leave a comment to let me know. The best part back then was that there was no lottery to enter to have a chance to compete. Again, when I tell you it was a crazy time back then with these rule sets, I'm not even kidding. Imagine having to pull a ticket, a lotto ticket, just to compete in a Pokemon tournament. But luckily for us, this is all done online, so we don't really need to worry about an in-person registration process. Some of you might be asking, how did we incorporate these rules in PBR when Team Preview is a thing in that game? For those that don't know, Gen 4 VGC had no Team Preview, so your lead predictions were probably not going to be on point, so your guesses were probably just as good as someone else's. We ultimately had to create a rule set that would best fit for what PBR gave us as a sneak peek for Black and White's metagame. So what exactly does that mean? We basically implemented the modern standard rule set for VGC with the tweaked additions of not allowing items to be moved around on your team after each battle. For this tournament specifically, we allowed players to bring 2 teams instead of sticking to just 1. And finally, best of 3 single elimination. I know a couple eyebrows raised up at the mention of 2 teams being allowed, but this allowed for more experimentation on an already pretty robust format with not much documentation online regarding resources, just to see what's best and what's not. Japan almost has everything documented regarding tiers, usage stats, etc., but that's for no Team Preview. The West has Team Preview if we're using PBR, so tier lists back then wouldn't really match up if we were to compare the no Team Preview format. All in all, this is extra data for us to collect, and if that rule still bothers you, well then just look at me in the eye. Karai. When people think of restricted legendary formats, this I would bet are the first set of Pokemon that people would think about, and that's completely fair. Weather either helps you or completely obliterates you. Let's take a look at Groudon's supporting cast of Pokemon that can benefit under the sun. Jumpluff, Exeggutor, and Shiftry all have Chlorophyll that doubles speed in the sun. Jumpluff's support move pools such as Sunny Day, Sleep Powder, Substitute, and Leech Seed are some phenomenal ways to mess with your opponent. With no Sleep Claws, you have a super fast Pokemon that can put everything to sleep and lets Groudon have a field day. At the cost of being super frail, you'd need to consider giving up a Focus Sash slot to this Pokemon if you're looking to withstand attacks for at least 2 turns. Otherwise, you could consider running a Wide Lens to further boost the accuracy of Sleep Powder if you don't mind the trade you put up at the risk of still missing the attack. Exeggutor and Shiftry provide the fastest explosion under the sun, but compared to Jumpluff, Exeggutor has more bulk and a better selection of moves to either go on the offense or on the defense. Shiftry under the sun becomes the fastest Fake Out user in the metagame. Fake Out is such a valuable move to hinder your opponent useless, and it's a pretty big deal for 1 turn. Under the sun, it becomes the second fastest Pokemon in the metagame, even against Pokemon with the Choice Scarf items such as Kyogre and the Lottie Twins, but also is the best offensive Pokemon to land heavy blows to your opponent because Jumpluff doesn't provide that. Regarding speed control, the sun looks pretty prominent. Groudon is a pretty flexible Pokemon to work around and doesn't necessarily need to rely on its supporting cast. Up against Trick Room, you can build your Groudon to be slow to either fight against it or for it. This Pokemon is able to deal heavy damage regardless, but the way you'll need to optimize it for speed control depends on what you need. For example, oftentimes you'll see Cresselia be a popular pick as it's one of the best Trick Room users because of its insane bulk and its reliability to use Helping Hand, and Groudon can easily spam Earthquake thanks to Cresselia's Levitate ability. And with that, because of an added damage boost, it makes a pretty good duo. There would be no need for its supporting cast under such conditions, as those Pokemon won't benefit under Trick Room, while also taking into account the weather war this metagame has, which I will get into soon. But we can't forget about Ho-Oh, as under the sun, launching a Sacred Fire with a 50% chance to burn with a Life Orb slapped onto it. It's just insane pressure. With a 154 base special defense stat, its natural bulk in a metagame full of special attackers allows it to almost guarantee itself the damage that it needs to support the team it's on. A fast Brave Bird or Earthquake gives it enough coverage to hit the tier with mostly neutral and welcoming opportunities of super effective damage against steel types. It became pretty difficult with no team preview to bring this Pokemon confidently, but with team preview it shapes Ho-Oh better, knowing what the opponent has to better position it due to its 90 speed stat that speed ties with other of the same maxed out speed tiers, then watching out for Palkias as well. On the topic of weather, the polar opposite Kyogre. This Pokemon has proven time and time again in the modern day that it is an absolute menace. For this format specifically, the Choice Scarf is the most popular pick. Water Spout in rain coming off of a base 150 special attack stat is enough for a grown man to reconsider getting married. The best supporting Pokemon is Ludicolo, Swift Swim doubling speed and launching Grass Nuts to deal heavy damage against opposing Kyogres, and even Groudon is a huge momentum booster. Ludicolo doesn't need to invest everything in its speed, nor need the timid nature on top of it to outspeed opposing Scarf Kyogres. This Pokemon is seen to be a good neutral ground pick as it matches up against the weather setters relatively nicely, provides fake out pressure, and can stall with Leech Seed and Protect. However, a certain mechanic in Gen 4 that makes Kyogre even more menacing is Follow Me. This move causes the redirection of all moves to be directed to the user. This has more priority over Fake Out. This is very good in matchups where the opponent needs to rely on a flinch so that Kyogre can take damage to weaken Water Spout. The best user of this move in my opinion is Togekiss. Its natural bulk allows it to tank heavy hits from Dialga, Palkia, and even Mewtwo. With a Citrus Berry, it provides a bit more longevity so that your whale can go to town. Remember when I mentioned the weather wars you'll encounter in this format? Behold Tyranitar. Not only is it a Pokemon that can erase the weather that's on the field, but it pairs nicely into Cresselia with Crunch and Dialga with Low Kick. Notice how we're focusing on moves based on weight? Even a Choice Band Floatzel using Low Kick can shred about 80% of a Dialga. Tyranitar in particular is someone that you can also dedicate a Focus Sash towards. Tyranitar's heavy offensive pressure is very valuable because of chip damage coming off of this particular Pokemon pays off greatly in the endgame for certain matchups. Another item that comes to mind is the Chople Berry, as you'll probably run into some fighting types like Hitmontop or even Hariyama going for fake out close combat shenanigans. But a Pokemon that pairs really well with Tyranitar is in fact Dialga. It's immune to Sandstorm damage and in my opinion the best mid-ground legendary to use when paired up against Kyogres, Palkias, and Giratinas. Dialga has the ability to reverse Trick Room if it goes up, which is huge and oftentimes not a move people expect. Expert Belt is pretty good on this Pokemon, and also the Leftovers, which is something that you'll often see on this Pokemon. Speaking of checks into Kyogres and such, Palkia is one of the best checks to Kyogre simply because it resists Water Spout and fires off Spatial Rens and other flexible moves for not just chip damage but heavy damage. With Spatial Ren being a high critical hit rate move, your best bet is to use it when you can. With a diverse move pool and also having the ability to reverse Trick Room as well, or using it to your advantage, then Palkia's flexibility makes it a case being up there with Dialga. But in my opinion, just a little slightly under, just because of the matchups against Dialgas, you can't really KO it without a Choice Specs boosted Draco Meteor most of the time. But that also depends on the spread that you're going up against. Whereas Dialga threatens a KO almost always, especially with the Expert Belt that I talked about earlier. You'll often see Palkia's attempt to get around this with Substitute. With proper positioning, you have a scary threat on the field, especially when paired up with Pokemon like Togekiss using Follow Me. Giratina's time to shine couldn't be done better than in this format, to be honest. Its natural bulk and flexibility with the type of Giratina you want to run really can run your opponent for their money. It's a serious threat towards Cresselios because of Shadow Force, and because that move basically makes it the Urshifu of this generation, and that move also going through Protect, getting a guaranteed hit off is always great to see, even if it's just for chip damage. It also pairs up well against Kyogres to resist Water Spouts. A strategy that I saw being used in Japan is Follow Me Electabuzz to direct damage to fetch out Static to paralyze the opponent and setting up a substitute with Giratina. Shadow Force behind a substitute? It's pretty scary if you ask me. Rayquaza with Airlock blocks all weather effects on the field. That means no boosted 100% blizzard accuracy under Hail, which also negates weather boosted speed abilities like Chlorophyll and Swift Swim. With a good extreme speed, Scarf Kyogres are rendered almost useless into clicking Water Spout. Swords Dance to boost the attack set even further, and launching such a crazy priority attack is 2-hit KOing almost everything in the tier at minimum. With a 150 base attack and special attack, it makes it so that you can run this Pokemon comfortably utilizing its diverse move pool depending on what you need for your team. Mewtwo fits the niche of having an excellent supporting cast of moves that makes it a bit more interesting than usual when comparing it to the other Pokemon that I was talking about earlier. It can utilize a fast self-destruct with its incredible speed stat, or get up Trick Room, dual screens, taunt, or even just run a Choice Specs special set with the coverage moves based on what your team needs, whether you're running a team under the rain or even the sun. A fast, reliable user to get chip damage off onto threats that scare your team with an absurd speed stat of 130 makes it a Pokemon of consideration. Because of the flexibility, Mewtwo's are a bit hard to predict with what the purpose of it's doing on the team. You won't see much team building around this specific Pokemon in most cases because of these reasons. So that's why it's not too bad of a choice to slap onto a team if you're just looking for something specific. Yeah, it can cost a restricted slot to bring into battle, but again, it works depending on what you need it to do. Lastly, Lugia. Despite being second in the World Championship Finals, with no team preview and a metagame shaping to counter the top weather setters, then it's one of those cases where Lugia has a niche pick to throw off those strategies. Its stat distribution is weird but good at the same time. It just lacks the power that needs to effectively dish off damage. After a Calm Mind boost, it can for sure get going, but to cater a restricted Pokemon that needs a bit of setup, it's hard to work with. However, in an open team preview format, I think Lugia can cater its niche to have builds more specifically for certain matchups. Despite not resisting Water Spouts, it does have the longevity it needs to whittle down your opponents. However, I think this Pokemon just needs a bit more experimenting. Overall, with a pretty quick and brief analysis over what the restricted Pokemon can do in this format, with all of that covered, let's jump into the team builder to show off what I ran for this tournament. Alright, here are the two teams I made for this tournament, so let's get started with the first one. So I opted for a bulky Kyogre rather than a Scarf variant to catch Trick Room users off guard so that I can utilize it to my advantage while also still having that respectable 150 special attack stat, allowing for 2-hit KOs on most Pokemon. This gets easier thanks to the help of Calm Mind while also having Thunder being 100% accurate under the rain and having the added spread move of Muddy Water, which is also boosted thanks to the rain. I have Protect on there so that I can combo it with the Leftovers Recovery just to provide some longevity for this specific Kyogre build. Palkia is here to assist Kyogre while also walling opposing Kyogres with the added moves of Spatial Rend, Aura Sphere for those Tyrannitars, and Thunder just to hit Kyogres more effectively. Lastly, I put Protect, while also having the Habanberry to win the matchups against other Palkias because we are pretty much speed tied all the time, and it delivers a bit of reassurance knowing that I can probably finish off my opponent's Palkias before they finish off mine, even if I lose the speed tie. Infernape is my prominent fake out user, while also rocking Protect. The only move I found worth running on this is Close Combat for damage and the hidden tech of Encore to lock my opponents to using attacks that put me in a better position. This Pokemon is perfect for the Focus Sash slot due to its weak defenses. Now, I can't touch Giratina with this set, but that's why you have other Pokemon on the team to deal with opposing Giratinas. And speaking of which, Giratina of my own is my Cresselia check with its Mighty Shadow Force, which also allows me to hit through Protect and Giratine's damage. The variant I decided to opt for is the Max Speed, Max Attack, and this variant allows the ability to use Dragon Claw, Shadow Sneak, and lastly Protect, and I put a Yachi Berry on there just for the Abomasnow matchups. I need something to tank and Ice move well, aside from Infernape, since Infernape is focusing on a different role for this team. But speaking of Abomasnow, I didn't talk about it too much earlier in the analysis, but I also put one for myself on my team. Abomasnow is usually just seen as a good old reliable Scarf user just to simply spam Blizzard, and it just matches up well against Groudon and Kyogre while also negating the weather boosted abilities to attack them with more immense pressure with supporting moves such as Grass Knot, Focus Blast, and Hidden Power Fire. Abomasnow just being able to resist Water Spouts and even Earthquakes coming off of stab damage from both of those Pokemon is just pretty valuable in my opinion. Last but not least, Ludicolo is there as a scare tactic to make sure my opponents bring Sun almost always if they're running it. I'm not even kidding. Obviously, it pairs up pretty well against Groudons thanks to its handy dandy Grass Knot, but this more offensive build has Hydro Pump and Ice Beam as well. Final move, I actually gave it Fake Out rather than Protect. I also put it as my dedicated Life Orb user just to dish out as much damage as possible to pick up those mighty KOs. For my second team, I opted for the Scarf Kyogre variant with a completely offensive set with Water Spout, Thunder, Ice Beam, and my hidden tech of Hidden Power Flying for Ludicolos. I decided to use this variant because of Togekiss as my dedicated Follow Me user that allows me to land Water Spouts without thinking twice, with the supporting moves of Thunder Wave, Air Slash, and Helping Hand. I also gave it the Citrus Berry just to give it longevity if it gets brought down below half, just to survive a second attack if there is one coming off of whatever it is that's using the move. Speaking of weather, we have the infamous Tyranitar simply to disrupt weather just like Abomasnow. This one is holding the Chople Berry with coverage moves such as Crunch, Rock Slide, and Low Kick for those Dialgas. And lastly, Protect. Storm does boost my special defense, and with a Chople Berry, I don't have to worry about Aura Spheres or even a close combat from Infernapes if need be. Now, if Sand and Rain weren't enough, I actually put Groudon onto this team as well. This is a specially defensive variant, which I think is the best variant to run with the moves Earthquake, Rock Slide, Fire Punch, and Protect. This one's holding the Lumberry just in case of any kind of hacks that come and intervene with Groudon's ability to perform effectively. And because I have Groudon with this specific build, I decided to also have Cresselia on the team just to specifically support Groudon in its endeavors. I can have Groudon go to town with a Trick Room up while being immune to Earthquakes thanks to Levitate from Cresselia that I can safely use Helping Hand to boost the damage on top of that, with the rest of the supporting cast moves of Light Screen and, well, not really a supporting cast move of this, but I put Psychic just for chip damage. Cresselia will be my dedicated Leftovers user. And last but not least, the best mid-ground restricted legendary slapped with an expert belt to pick up knockouts onto Palkios with Dragon Pulse while also dishing out heavy pressure with Earth Power against those Tyrannitars, or even Metagross for that matter, and Thunder for those Kyogres, while finally having Protect as my last move. Those are the two teams I decided to cook with, so let's just go ahead and see how these teams performed in the tournament. I had a bye going into round 1, so we will begin going through round 2 instead. I was up against a team similar to my second one, however I see the Infernape and think to myself, welp, this is anyone's game round 1 in this best of 3 set. And that's because whoever gets Fake Out first is probably going to be the one that's at a great advantage off the start. Other than that, regarding Weather Wars, I already know that my opponent was probably going to bring Sun, and then on top of that Hail to reset any other weather conditions so that it's in my opponent's favor. With that being the case, I opted not to bring Rain in this game because even so, my opponent has a Palkia, so I'll rely solely on Hail. I could also be potentially facing a Trick Room Cresselia with the Groudon, so I wanted to bring Giratina to check it, and that's why it's on the team to begin with. The match begins, and like I thought, it's the fake out standoff. Infernape is the only Pokemon at risk as Giratina is immune to it. So the game plan was to fake out the Palkia and Shadow Force just in case things go wrong and that I have guaranteed attack landing on the Palkia. This level of future planning was crucial for me to identify what kind of Palkia I'm fighting. Is it bulky? Is it max speed? I ended up winning the speed tie, which allowed for my play to play out safely. In theory, a Spatial Rend was probably coming out onto my Giratina, so this worked out perfectly. After protecting Infernape, I secured a safe turn, and after, Shadow Force landed. I confirmed that this is not a Trick Room variant Palkia with max HP because of how the speed turns played out. I lose the speed tie here and my opponent takes out my Infernape. Palkia protected because my opponent knows of a potential loss in another speed tie, so protect was pretty brilliant on their end. This allowed me to go for a Shadow Force again for free basically. With the Snowman out, switching into Groudon was inevitable, but switching was risky, so I decided to stay in and hope I can land a Blizzard onto both. This will deal huge damage on Groudon and break a possible Focus Sash on the Infernape. I looked at my screen, panicked, and saw that it landed on Groudon. Best case scenario to be honest. With Heat Wave taking out my Snowman, I'm left to open fire a Shadow Force onto Infernape to confirm that it's actually holding a Focus Sash. Using Heat Wave was a great reveal, and that indicated that there's likely no tech move in its moveset like Encore. With Palkia sent out, the speed advantage looks pretty great here. I can Shadow Sneak the Infernape and knock out Groudon safely with a secure Aura Sphere, not having to risk a miss with Spatial Rend. With Protect revealed on Infernape, I confirmed that there is no tech move to worry about. Palkia is sent out again, speed tie galore, but I'm at the advantage because of my HP. The switch into the Snowman didn't matter. I can Protect and stall a turn for a guaranteed knockout onto it later. I lose the speed tie. Any crit? Luckily, no. Palkia goes down, Infernape gets sent out, so I resort to my plan to double protect. I don't know if the Snowman is scarfed, so I had to play it safe. Infernape goes down, and it turns out it's not a scarf variant, but rather max HP. I had nothing to worry about here. I Shadow Force just in case it was, so that I can dish out better damage after tanking it with my Yachi Berry, and then finish it with a Shadow Sneak. I was in a good position regardless, unless I froze, but that was the end of game 1. Game 2 begins and we both bring different teams. I'm a little confused with the team I'm facing. This is obviously a Trick Room team, but what logically is brought to this battle? I assume Dialga and Machamp are for sure coming. They benefit very well under Trick Room. I see Clefable being the follow me user to guarantee the Trick Room going up. Luckily, I have a trick up my sleeve to stop this with my own Trick Room and reverse it. I decide to lead Cresselia and Dialga while bringing Tyranitar and Groudon in the back. Turn 1 begins and it's Clefable and Palkia, so I know that this is a follow me and Trick Room strat right off the bat. I'll target the Palkia just in case and go for Trick Room with my own Cresselia to reverse it, but I ran into a problem. My Cresselia has the wrong moves. This was devastating to find out mid-match. I'm stuck with Psychic, Ice Beam, Protect, and Thunder Wave, which obviously doesn't help my case. I thought the whole time I brought the correct one. I had no other choice but to just Psychic in this case. Like I thought, it's follow me. 2 attacks are landing onto the Clefable while Palkia gets to set up a Trick Room. This is bad. The Clefable then goes for a move I never saw coming. Endeavor, a move that brings down the target's HP equal to the user. I wanted to protect so badly, but I just didn't want the Clefable to get any ideas. Unfortunately, I lose my Dialga and Palkia attacks it to finish it off. I finish off the Clefable with the Psychic, but this was a terrible trade. Groudon and Dialga get sent out. I have no choice but to protect stall a little bit just to get the Trick Room to expire. I'm forced to attack, but something works well into my favor. After getting hit with the Dragon Pulse from Dialga, my opponent missed the Spatial Rend. However, it didn't matter, and that's because of my investment. This would not have taken down my Groudon. My opponent would have needed a critical hit to secure the knockout. I confirmed with my opponent that this was a max special attack Palkia, and in situations like these, This is why Special Defense Groudon is the best variant in my opinion. With my slip up, I wasn't entirely punished. The difference is that this puts Groudon in a better position to have more HP against whoever was in the back. I land a Psychic for chip damage onto the Palkia, and then after I resorted to Protect stalling of course to reduce the turns of Trick Room and landing another Psychic onto the Palkia. Dialga protects here, but that's okay as I do outspeed the Palkia with both Pokemon and knock it out. Now to see who's in the back. And it's Machamp. Earthquake and Psychic should win me the game here. The Dialga gets a double protect off, but Psychic hits, but the Machamp recovers with its Citrus Berry. The out to this was to get Confusion Hacks, but thanks to the Lumberry, I don't have to deal with that. My opponent concedes the match, and in the off chance my Groudon went down after taking a hit with Spatial Rend, I still had Tyranitar that I know outspeeds the Dialga and knock it out with a low kick, and Cresselia cleans up the Machamp. This was a crazy game 2 overall, and I advanced to the semifinals. My next opponent brought the most diabolical mixed weather team I've seen yet in this tournament. The good news is that I know which restricted Pokemon will be brought to this match, but the question is, what are the supporting cast? Judging by my team alone, Ludicolo is probably being brought alongside the Kyogre, Cresselia for mid-ground play, and finally Groudon in the back. I decided to lead Infernape and Giratina to start with the Fake Out Shadow Force route. If my opponent leads Kyogre and Ludicolo, then if their Ludicolo has Fake Out, it's the fastest Fake Out user up because of Swift Swim. My opponent leads Ludicolo, but Aerodactyl instead of Kyogre. I have a Fake Out at my disposal, but I have no idea what on earth Aerodactyl does here. The first turn begins and the arrow protects blocking my Fake Out. No worries because I get Shadow Force off regardless. But something to note is that Ludicolo went for Leech Seed. This tells me that this is a stall set, which doesn't matter because I crit anyways with close combat while also taking out Arrow in one hit with Shadow Force. In comes the Jumpluff, so I thought Groudon was coming. To my surprise, it was Kyogre instead. Works better for me. I have the perfect answer, the Snowman. Switch Infernape and protect Giratina. Hail breaks a potential Focus Sash from Jumpluff and I'm free to Blizzard for free here. I tank Water Spout super well here, KO the Jumpluff, and somehow freeze the Kyogre. Shadow Force begins and the freeze didn't really matter in hindsight, but this was a swift game 1. On to game 2, we both bring the same teams, but my plan is the same with who I want to lead with. My opponent leads Cresselia and Groudon this time. I have to stop the Trick Room, so I Fake Out the Crest and Shadow Force right away. Earthquake brings me down to my Focus Sash, my opponent switches into Jumpluff, I decide to Encore to force the Earthquake so that my Snowman can come in for free. Jumpluff is in KO range and Groudon is about to be sent to its own volcano where it came from. But Ludicolo switches in to tank the Blizzard instead, but Jumpluff goes down. Ludicolo goes down to Dragon Claw. Groudon and Cresselia are the last ones in the back. It's going to be dicey. I have no way to shut down Trick Room, and I have to Raw Blizzard. I get outsped anyways if the Trick Room goes up, so there's no point in trying to preserve it, but I miss my Blizzard. Very unfortunate. Shadow Force fires off, and I have to hit my next Blizzard. Cresselia sets up the light screen and Groudon goes for a Swords Dance. I missed my Blizzard twice. That sealed the game. Had they landed, that was the game. I can only go for Shadow Sneak to KO the Crest, and Groudon has a field day. I could protect the stall, but I die anyways next turn. There's no way to stall the Trick Room. After the Earthquake, I lost both Mons. I attempted to do what I could with Palkia, but to no avail. Game 2 was sealed. Ugh. With Game 3, I decided to bring my other team, but the opponent stays with the same one. I have the advantage of knowing their team a bit while this one is completely fresh. I decided it was time to try Follow Me Water Spout. Risky, but I wanted to try. My own Cresselia is useless here thanks to the incorrect moves it had. I decided to lock in with Tyranitar and Dialga in the back. My opponent leads Groudon and Cresselia. It's Trick Room again, so I decided to switch into Tyranitar in case there was a Protect. I was correct. My Air Slash missed as I was hoping for a flinch, but this actually works out in my favor. Both of my Pokemon are actually slower than the Groudon. Crunch is a 2-hit KO on the Crest, so I decided to fire one off. I Thunder Wave to disrupt the turn, which can work better for me later if I do get lucky. But I think Air Slash was better though. I tank the Earthquake and it's time to make a choice. Rock Slide and Air Slash to fish for a flinch, or take out the Cresselia now with Crunch and hope my Air Slash flinches? I opted to do that instead. And it worked out. Cresselia is down and I have another turn with Tyranitar. Ludicolo is sent out. This is an interesting position because in theory I could switch into Kyogre, threaten the Groudon and Water Spout / Hidden Power flying the Ludicolo instead and double into it for the knockout. I didn't think of this at the time because I was more so worried about the Groudon fishing for the chance to set up with the Swords Dance. I Air Slash instead into a Protect and my Tyranitar lives to see another day. I had another choice. Rock Slide or Crunch the Groudon. I decided to Crunch rather than fish for a flinch and Air Slash the Ludicolo for chip damage. I lose both Pokemon to Rock Slide. Now it's scary. Ludicolo threatens a KO onto my Kyogre, so I have to find a way to seal this with Dialga. I know my opponent wants the weather control, so the switch was obvious. I tank the Grass Knot and I shoot the Ice Beam into the Groudon slot, hitting the Jumpluff. I should have doubled into this slot, but I feared the Protect on Groudon for some reason if there was no switch. I lost my Kyogre to Grass Knot, and for some odd reason, I wasn't hit with the Sleep Powder. I thought I for sure had lost if that was the case, but the fight is still on. The plan is simple. I have to target the Groudon. The Ludicolo is confirmed to not be able to dent Dialga. Will the Leech Seed recovery be enough to live a Dragon Pulse? Perhaps. If it was special defense invested, to which it wasn't. Game secured. Ludicolo loses the 1v1 and on to the finals I go. This is another example as to why special defense Groudon is simply better. It's time for the finals, and Ho-Oh, Mewtwo, Sun Team with a random Ludicolo. Hi Arcanine. Ludicolo is there for Kyogre insurance of course, but I don't see the Mewtwo making an appearance here. I predict Ludicolo, Groudon, Ho-Oh, and Jumpluff coming in. So I decided to go with the safe lead of Infernape, Giratina. No rain, no fear of fake out from Ludicolo, so I have the speed advantage regarding that. Abomasnow and Palkia in the back, and with that, my opponent leads Ludicolo and Groudon. If this wasn't a hard Kyogre shutdown lead, I don't know what is. This is a safe Abomasnow switch in, and nothing harms it and a free fake out to fire off. First Icy Wind Ludicolo that I've seen, so I can tell the Groudon isn't defensively built if there is that kind of speed control. I force Groudon to switch, secure the knockout onto Ludicolo with close combat. With Ho-Oh out on the field, under Sun, it's going to hurt like a truck. I switch the Snowman out, it's going to be valuable here. Palkia is my choice to sack as Giratina in the back doesn't want to get burned. Sacred Fire hurts, and now I can confirm it's Life Orb, plus I get burned. What stinks about Ho-Oh is that it has a base 90 speed stat, so I can take advantage of dishing out a lot of damage onto it and putting it in range of Shadow Sneak and Blizzard. I lose both Pokemon to Earthquake as the Groudon protects. Not a problem. This is the easiest Blizzard to KO the Chicken Hawk, and Jumpluff goes down to Dragon Claw. Can Abomasnow redeem itself by landing a Blizzard under the sun? Wow, it actually did. Based on damage calc, this is yet another Groudon with no special defense investment. Telling you guys, Spadef is the way to go. I've cracked the code on this, I promise you. Game 1 is sealed. On to Game 2. We both stay with the same teams. This time I decided it's time for the Whale paired up with Infernape for fake out pressure. I run the risk of Ludicolo, but that's okay. Abomasnow and Giratina are also in the back. My opponent leads Arcanine and Ho-Oh. No Groudon, but I assume that it's in the back. Glory behold, it is. Arcanine switches out and the Chicken Hawk protects, negating my fake out. My Kyogre launches a Muddy Water for very nice chip damage under the sun. I decided to switch into Giratina here to preserve my fake out for later. I could have also gone into Abomasnow to reset weather and not have Muddy Water reduce damage under the sun, but I wanted to make sure that my Abomasnow was healthy just in case Ludicolo and or Jumpluff were in the back. Ho-Oh launches a Brave Bird, to which I tanked nicely, but holy smokes, did that hurt. But the most diabolical turn to ever happen occurred in which I crit both the Ho-Oh and the Groudon. The Groudon could have lived, I'm just saying, if it was a bit specially defensive. But even without the crit, Earthquake, I assume, would not have picked up the knockout as it's a spread move and how my Kyogre is trained, which would lead to a mid-game grind to fire off a Shadow Force to secure the knockout I needed on either Groudon or Ho-Oh, but 2 crits works too. I decided to switch my Whale for Rain later. Shadow Sneak is in range to KO the Ho-Oh, and to avoid a Sleep Powder, I think Abomasnow was still the best switch overall. My opponent goes for the hidden tech of Tail Whip. If that hole was any healthier, something was getting bazookaed for sure. I understood the tech. It's not silly. However, Scarf Blizzard picks up the KO onto Jumpluff and chip damage into Arcanine in retaliation for a Heatwave KO onto my own Abomasnow. It served its purpose at this point, so now we just clean up the game and get the win and overall win the tournament. It feels short because of my bypass of round 1, but as a reminder, other matches took place outside of my own that you can check out for yourself on the Archives channel. Here are my personal placements of restricteds and non-restricteds. I think this tournament not only changes the viability of some Pokemon like Kyogre for example, I just don't think it's a crazy uncheckable threat and S tier worthy, to be honest. I think Dialga fits the S tier instead as the best mid-ground restricted, and then the following placements that you see for yourself. Now, you can agree or disagree here, but don't come after my throat if you disagree. Instead, present a case to why you think otherwise and if there's something that you would change here. This format is technically brand new, and thanks to the Open Team preview format of Battle Revolution, which means new Pokemon, strategies, tech, and much more have still yet to be discovered. This is exciting for a multitude of reasons, as this format is just super balanced and nothing feels entirely broken over the other, and that a newly discovered format like this has a great future ahead for itself. If you guys enjoyed today's video, be sure you leave a like and subscribe if you are new to not miss out on future uploads. That is all I have for you guys today. You can join the Discord server if you're looking to play Pokemon Battle Revolution online with the community and join tournaments. And with that being said, I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.